Hello students, in this video we are going to study chapter 12 ecosystem of class 12th NCERT biology. In this chapter we will cover some 5 topics that are ecosystem structure and function, productivity, one second, productivity, decomposition, energy flow and ecological pyramids. So here we start. An ecosystem can be visualized as a functional unit of nature where living organisms interact among themselves and also with the surrounding physical environment. Ecosystem varies greatly in size from a small pond to a large forest or a sea. Many ecologists regard the entire biosphere as a global ecosystem, as a composite of all local ecosystems on Earth. Since this system is too much big and complex to be studied at one time, it is convenient to divide it into two basic categories, namely terrestrial and aquatic. Forest, grassland, desert are some examples of terrestrial ecosystems. Pond, lake, wetland, river, and estuary are some examples of aquatic ecosystems. Crop fields and an aquarium may also be considered as a man-made ecosystems. We will first look at the structure of the ecosystem in order to appreciate the input, productivity, transfer of energy, food chain or web, nutrient cycling, and the output, that is degradation and energy loss. We will also look at the relationship cycles, chains, webs that are created as a result of these energy flows within the system and their interrelationship. Coming into the first heading, that is ecosystem structure and function. That is ecosystem structure and function. Here we start. In earlier classes, you have looked at various components of the environment, abiotic and biotic. What are abiotic components? Abiotic components are components that are non-living, and biotic components are components that are living. You studied how the individual biotic and abiotic factors affected each other and their surrounding. Let us look at these components in a more integrated manner and see how the flow of energy takes place within these components of the ecosystem. Interaction of biotic and abiotic components result in a physical structure that is characteristic of each type of ecosystem. Identification and enumeration of plant and animal species of an ecosystem give its species composition. Vertical distribution of its different species occupying different levels is called stratification. For example, trees occupy top vertical strata or layer of a forest. Shrubs the second and herbs the grasses occupy the bottom layers. The component of ecosystem are seen to function as a unit when you consider the following aspects, that are productivity, decomposition, energy flow and nutrient cycling. To understand the ethos of an aquatic ecosystem, let us take a small pond as an example. This is a fairly self-sustainable unit and rather simple example that explain even the complex interactions that exist in an aquatic ecosystem. A pond is a shallow water body in which all the above mentioned 4 basic components of an ecosystem are well exhibited. The abiotic component is the water with all the dissolved inorganic and organic substances and the rich soil deposit at the bottom of the pond. The solar input, the cycle of temperature, day length and other climatic conditions regulate the rate of function of the entire pond. The autotrophic components include the phytoplankton, some algae and the floating submerged and marginal plants found at the edges. The consumers are represented by zooplankton, the free-swimming and bottom-dwelling forms. The decomposers are the fungi, bacteria and flagellates, especially abundant in the bottom of the pond. This system performs all the functions of any ecosystem and of the biosphere as a whole. It means conversion of inorganic into organic material with the help of a radiant energy of the sun by autotrophs, consumption of autotrophs by heterotrophs, decomposition and mineralization of dead matter to release them back for use by the autotrophs. These events are repeated over and over again. There is unidirectional movement of energy towards the higher trophic levels and its dissipation and loss as heat to the environment. Next is productivity. A constant input of solar energy is the basic requirement for any ecosystem to function and sustain. Primary production is defined as the amount of biomass or organic matter produced per unit area over a time period by plants during photosynthesis. It is expressed in terms of weight or energy. The rate of biomass production is called productivity. It is expressed in terms of gm to the power minus 2 by r to the power minus 1 to compare the productivity of different ecosystems. It can be divided into gross primary productivity, GPP in short, and net primary productivity, NPP for short. Gross primary productivity of an ecosystem is the rate of production of organic matter during photosynthesis. A considerable amount of gross primary productivity (GPP) is utilized by plants in respiration. Gross primary productivity minus respiration losses, that is denoted by R for short, is the net primary productivity (NPP) for short. GPP minus R, that is respiration losses, E is equal to net primary productivity. Net primary productivity is the available biomass for all the consumption of two heterotrophs, herbivores and decomposers. Secondary productivity is defined as the rate of formation of new organic matter by consumers. Primary productivity depends on the plant species inhabiting a particular area. It also depends on a variety of environmental factors, availability of nutrients, and photosynthetic capacity of plants. Therefore, it varies in different types of ecosystems. The annual net primary productivity of the whole biosphere is approximately 170 billion tons in dry weight of organic matter. Of this, despite occupying about 70% of the surface, the productivity of oceans are only 55 billion tons. The rest, of course, is on land. Discuss the main reason for the low productivity of ocean with your teacher. That's your question. Coming to the next heading, that is decomposition. You may have heard of the earthworm being referred to as farmer's friend. This is so because they help in breakdown of complex organic matter as well as the loosening of soil. Similarly, decomposers break down complex organic matter into inorganic substances like carbon dioxide, water, and nutrients, and the process is called decomposition. Dead plants remain such as leaves, bark, flower, and dead remains of animals, including fecal matter, constitute detritus, which is the raw material for decomposition. The important steps in the process of decomposition are fragmentation, leaching, catabolism, humidification, and mineralization. Detritivores like earthworm break down the detritus into small particles. This process is called fragmentation. By the process of leaching, water-soluble inorganic nutrients go down into the soil horizon and get precipitated as unavailable salts. Bacterial and fungal enzymes degrade detritus into simpler inorganic substances. This process is called catabolism. It is important to note that all the above steps in decomposition operate simultaneously on the detritus. Humidification and mineralization occur during decomposition in the soil. Humidification leads to accumulation of dark colored amorphous substance called humus that's highly resistant to microbial action and undergoes decomposition at an extremely slow rate. Here's the diagrammatic representation of decomposition cycle in a terrestrial ecosystem. Firstly, a tree grows in the soil. The next step is a green leaf falls to the ground, and then some are eaten by insects and other animals. Nutrients are energy into the food web after eating by caterpillars or insects. The next step is some nutrients leach into soil by chemical action. So this is organic rich soil. From this, further decomposition by earthworms, bacteria, soil mites, fungi, etc. The next step is leaves partially consumed by the decomposers such as fungi and bacteria. They begin to lose form and become lighter. From this step here, green leaf falls to the ground and some are eaten by insect and other animals. Nutrients and energy enter the food web. Then a different step enters, that is leaves partially consumed by decomposers such as fungi and bacteria. They begin to lose form and become lighter. Then from this step comes that step further decomposition by earthworm, bacteria, soil mites, fungi, etc. Okay, so let's begin our reading. Being colloidal in nature, it serves as a reservoir of nutrients. The humus is further degraded by some microbes and release of inorganic nutrients occur by the process known as mineralization. Decomposition is largely an oxygen requiring process. The rate of decomposition is controlled by chemical composition of detritus and climatic factors. In a particular climatic condition, decomposition rate is slower if detritus is rich in lignin and chitin, and quicker if detritus is rich in nitrogen and water soluble substances like sugar. This is important. This lignin and chitin, if it is rich in lignin and chitin, decomposition rate is slower if detritus is rich in lignin and chitin, and quicker if detritus is rich in nitrogen and water soluble substances like sugars. Temperature and soil moisture are the most important climatic factors that regulate decomposition through their effects on the activities of soil microbes. Warm and moist environment favor decomposition, whereas low temperature and anaerobiosis inhibit decomposition, resulting in build-up of organic materials. Next is energy flow. Except for the deep sea hydrothermal ecosystem, sun is only source of energy for all the ecosystems on earth. Of the incident solar radiation, less than 50% of it is photosynthetically active radiation, PAR for short. We know that the plants and photosynthetic bacteria autotrophs fix sun's radiant energy to make food from simple inorganic materials. Plants capture only 2 to 10% of the PAR, and this small amount of energy sustains the entire living world. So it is very important to know how the solar energy captured by plants flow through different organisms of an ecosystem. All organisms are dependent for their food on producers, either directly or indirectly. So you find unidirectional flow of energy from the sun to producers and then to consumers. Is this in keeping with the first law of thermodynamics? Further, ecosystems are not exempt from the second law of thermodynamics. They need a constant supply of energy to synthesize the molecules they require to counteract the universal tendency towards increasing disorder lines. The green plant ecosystem are called producers. In a terrestrial ecosystem, major producers are herbaceous and woody plants. Likewise, producers in an aquatic ecosystem are various species like phytoplankton, algae, and higher plants. You have to read about the food chains and webs that exist in nature, starting from the plants or producers. Food chains or other webs are formed such that an animal feeds on plant or on another animal and in turn is food for another. A chain or web is formed because of this interdependency. No energy that is trapped into an organism remains in it forever. The energy trapped by the producer hence is either passed on to a consumer or an organism dies. Death or organism is beginning of the detritus food chain or web. All animals depend on plants directly or indirectly for their food needs. They are hence called consumers and also heterotrophs. If they feed on the producers, the plants, they are called primary consumers, and if the animals eat other animals which in turn eat the plants or they produce, they are called secondary consumers. Likewise, you could have tertiary consumers too. Obviously, the primary consumers will be herbivores. Some common herbivores are insects, birds, and mammals in terrestrial ecosystem and mollusks in an aquatic ecosystem. The consumers that feed on these herbivores are carnivores. Are more correctly primary carnivores, so secondary consumers. Those animals that depend on the primary carnivores for food are labeled secondary carnivores. A simple grazing food chain GFC is depicted below for short. Grazing food chain GFC for short. Grass is producer to goat is primary consumer and barn is secondary consumer. The detritus food chain DFC begins with dead organic matter. It is made up of decomposers, which are heterotrophic organisms, mainly fungi and bacteria. They meet their energy and nutrient requirements by degrading dead organic matter and detritus. These are also known as saprotrophs. Sapro means to decompose. Decomposers secrete digestive enzymes that break down dead and waste materials into simple inorganic materials, which are subsequently absorbed by them. In an aquatic ecosystem, GFC is a major conduit for energy flow. As against this, in terrestrial ecosystem, much larger fraction of energy flows through the detritus food chain and through GFC. Detritus food chain may be connected with the grazing food chain at some levels. Some of the organisms of DFC are prey to the GFC animals. In and in a natural ecosystem, the some animals like cockroaches, crows, etc. are omnivorous. These are natural interconnection of food chains make it a food web. How would you classify human beings? Organisms occupy a place in unnatural surroundings or in a community according to their feeding relationships with other organisms. Based on the source of their nutrition or food, organisms occupy a specific place in the food chain that is known as trophic level. Producers belong to the first trophic level, herbivores primary consumer to the second, and carnivore secondary consumer to the third. Here's the table, diagrammatic representation of trophic levels in an ecosystem. Here we go. Here. One second. The important point to note is that the amount of energy decreases at successive trophic levels. When an organism dies, it is converted to detritus or dead biomass that serves as an energy source for the decomposers. Organisms at each trophic level depend on those at the lower trophic level for their energy demands. Each trophic level has a certain mass of living material at particular time called as standing crop. The standing crop is measured as the mass of living organism biomass or the number in a unit area. The biomass of a species is expressed in terms of fresh or dry weight. Measurement of biomass in terms of dry weight is more accurate. Why? The number of trophic levels in grazing food chain is restricted as the transfer of energy flow follows 10% law. Only 10% of the energy is transferred to each trophic level from the lower trophic level. In nature, it is possible to have so many levels: producer, herbivore, primary carnivore, secondary carnivore in the grazing food chain. Do you think there is many such limitation in a detritus food chain? Answer this question. Next is ecological pyramids. You must be familiar with the shape of a pyramid. The base of the pyramid is broad and it narrows towards the apex. One gets a similar shape whether you express the food or energy relationship between organisms at different trophic levels. This relationship is expressed in terms of number, biomass, or energy. The base of each pyramid represents the producers or the first trophic level, while the apex represents tertiary or top level consumer. The three types of ecological pyramids that are usually studied are: first, pyramid of number, pyramid of biomass, and pyramid of energy. For detail, see figure 12.4 A, B, C, and D. Here, pyramid of numbers in grassland ecosystem. Here, producers that are denoted by P. Here, producers that are denoted by P are 58 lakh 42,000. Here, primary consumer denoted by PC. Primary consumers are denoted by PC are 7 lakh 8,000, and then the tertiary consumers denoted by TC are then there are secondary consumers denoted by SC that are 3 lakh 54,000. Then are tertiary consumers that are only 3. So you can see that tertiary consumers are much less than producers. Primary consumer are less than producers. So you can write it as P are more than PC, primary consumers. They are more than secondary consumer, SC, and they are more than tertiary consumers, or vice versa. So like this you can write it. Okay. Then this pyramid of biomass shows a sharp decrease in biomass at higher trophic levels. So here it is: producers that are denoted by P are 809, primary consumer 37, and secondary consumer 11, and tertiary consumer 1.5. So that is your table. This and this, and this is important. Okay, this is important. This all is important. Then it is inverted pyramid of biomass, a small standing crop of phytoplankton supports large standing crop of zooplankton. Here producers are 4 and primary consumers are 21. Then it is an ideal pyramid of energy. Like 10% goes to higher trophic level. So producer has suppose that 10,000 joule of sunlight. That producers has 10,000 joule energy. So when any primary consumer eats producers, so the energy they got is 1000 joule. It decreases by 10%. Secondary consumer get only 100 joules, and tertiary consumers they get 10 joules. So this is cycle. Okay. So let's study any calculations of energy content. Any calculation of energy content, biomass or numbers has to include all organisms at that trophic level. No generalization we make will be true if we'll take only a few individuals at any trophic level into account. Also, a given organism may occupy more than one trophic level simultaneously. One must remember that the trophic level represents a functional level, not a species as such. A given species may occupy more than one trophic level in the same ecosystem at the same time. For example, a sparrow is a primary consumer when it eats seeds, fruits, peas, and a secondary consumer when it eats insects and worms. Can you work out how many trophic levels a human being function at any food chain? In most ecosystems, all the pyramids of number, energy, and biomass are upright. It means producers are more in number and biomass than the herbivores, and the herbivores are more in number and the biomass than the carnivores. Also, energy at lower trophic level is always more than the higher at the higher level. There are exceptions to this generalization. If you are to count the number of insects at the feeding locality, what kind of pyramid would you get? Now, at an estimate of number of small birds depending on the insects as also the number of larger birds eating the smaller, draw the shape you could get. The pyramid of biomass in sea is generally inverted because of the biomass of fishes far exceeds that of phytoplankton. Is not that a paradox? How would you explain this? Pyramid of energy is always upright, can never be inverted because of when energy flows from a particular trophic level to next trophic level, some energy is always lost as heat at each step. Each bar in the energy pyramid indicates the amount of energy present at each trophic level in a given time or annually per unit area. Sorry. However, there are certain limitations of ecological pyramids, such as it does not take into account the same species belonging to two or more trophic levels. It assumes a simple food chain, something that almost never exists in nature. It does not accommodate a food web. Moreover, saprophytes are not given any place in ecological pyramids, even though they play a vital role in the ecosystem. Going to the summary. Going to the summary. Here it is. So let's study the summary first. An ecosystem is a structural and functional unit of nature, and it comprises abiotic and biotic components. Abiotic components are inorganic materials, air, water, soil, whereas biotic components are producers, consumers, and decomposers. Each ecosystem has characteristic physical structure resulting from interactions among abiotic and biotic components. Species composition and stratification are two main structural features of an ecosystem. Based on source of nutrition, every organism occupies a place in the ecosystem. Productivity, decomposition, energy flow, and nutrient cycling are the four important components of an ecosystem. Primary productivity as the rate of capture of solar energy or biomass production of the producer. It is divided into two types. It is divided into two types: gross primary productivity GPP and net primary productivity NPP for short. Rate of the capture of solar energy or total production of an organic matter is called as GPP. NPP is the remaining biomass or the energy left after utilization of producers. Secondary productivity is the rate of assimilation of food energy by the consumers. In decomposition, complex organic compound of detritus are converted into carbon dioxide, water, and inorganic nutrients by the decomposers. Decomposition involves three processes, namely fragmentation of detritus, leaching, and catabolism. Energy flow is unidirectional. First, plants capture solar energy, and then food is transferred from the producers to the decomposers. Organisms of different trophic level in nature are connected to each other for food or energy relationship, forming a food chain. The storage and movement of nutrient elements to the various components of the ecosystem is called nutrient cycling. Nutrients are repeatedly used through this process. Nutrient cycling is of two types, gaseous and sedimentary. Atmosphere or hydrosphere is the reservoir for the gaseous type of cycle. Carbon, whereas earth crust is the reservoir for sedimentary type. Phosphorus. Products of ecosystem process are named as ecosystem services, purification of an air and water by forest. Thank you. Thanks for watching.